The opinions presented in this video are all my own and were formed through a mix of both research-based and anecdotal evidence, as well as an acknowledgement of personal bias. The idea behind this video is to encourage discussion around the possible evolution of books, writing and publishing, and I highly encourage anyone watching this video who is interested in the topics discussed to do further research and form their own opinions. If you have any thoughts on any of the topics discussed in the video, or you are interested in a more in-depth discussion on any of them, let me know in the comments down below, and as always I would love to hear your thoughts. With all that said, on with the show. I hope you all enjoy. Hi, I'm Ven, welcome to my book corner. Today is a bit of a thought piece, which is something I've not really done before, because there's a few little signs that I'm seeing within the publishing industry that has me a little bit concerned about the possible worst case scenario future for publishing and for authors as well. Now, this is all my opinion. Some of this does involve some leaps realistically. However, there are certain trends that you see within mass media which haven't quite found their way over to publishing yet for books, and I don't think it's necessarily that far away, as well as a number of other challenges as well, both legislative and ethical. So I want to look at 4 different things. I want to look at legislation and book banning. I want to look at AI, algorithmic content, and book subscriptions before leaving off with why I think all is not lost. So let's jump into probably the easiest of all these topics to talk about. Up first, we have book banning and book censorship. Now, this is a really hot topic in multiple places of the world right now. So I'm going to focus mainly on what is going on in the US. To give an idea of sheer scale of the issue currently faced in the US, prior to 2021, the average amount of unique titles targeted per year for school book bannings was 273. Yet, according to the ALA, 1,858 unique titles were challenged in 2021, 2,571 in 2022, and 4,240 in 2023. As a secondary source, PEN America records 10,046 instances of individual book challenges, affecting a total of 4,231 unique titles, which is pretty much the same number. This affects things in 2 ways. Number 1, it takes books out of the hands of students, preventing them from having a diverse reading pool and limiting their reading experience. And this is really important for 2 main reasons. Number 1, it acts as a limiter on their scope of imagination due to the fact that they're not being exposed to a vast myriad of ideas. And number 2, it can significantly narrow down the potential worldview of people who are going through the formative years of their life. PEN America defines a school book ban as any action taken against a book based on its content and as a result of parent or community challenges, administrative decisions, or in response to direct or threatened action by lawmakers or other government officials that leads to a previously accessible book being either completely removed from availability to students, or where access to a book is restricted or diminished access in a form of censorship and has educational implications that extend beyond a title's removal. Also, in response to the question, is a book really banned if students can find it elsewhere, PEN America has this statement up. As public institutions, schools must serve our diverse democracy. School libraries provide a vital resource for educators, students, and parents in both supporting literacy and helping young people learn about the world. School libraries are places of voluntary inquiry, and efforts to restrict what information and ideas are available there often entail efforts to suppress or censor particular viewpoints, stories, and histories. There is also no guarantee that students will have easy or equitable access to books in other locations, have money to purchase a book, or even know a book exists. Many students in the United States attend schools without libraries or in districts without ready access to public libraries. Not all parents and families have the time or means to access public libraries or to purchase books. This makes the ready availability of materials to students in school libraries unique and consequential to American democracy. Efforts to censor or ban books also spread to public libraries and booksellers, belying the idea that current efforts to censor books are only focused on schools. Public schools are part of the fabric of our democracy, and public school libraries have been recognised as demanding special First Amendment protection. This means that even if particular book titles can be accessed elsewhere, the restriction of them in libraries is nevertheless a potential infringement of students' constitutional rights. The Supreme Court has held that one is not to have the exercise of his liberty of expression in appropriate places abridged on the plea that it may be exercised in some other place. Ready access to ideas and information is a necessary predicate to the right to exercise freedom of meaningful speech, press, or political freedom in our democracy for young people and adults alike. Consider the following excerpt from the 1978 decision of the U.S. District Court for the District of Massachusetts in Right to Read Defense Committee of Chelsea versus School Committee of the City of Chelsea. The library is a mighty resource in the marketplace of ideas. There, a student can literally explore the unknown and discover areas of interest and thought not covered by the prescribed curriculum. The student who discovers the magic of the library is on the way to a lifelong experience of self-education and enrichment. That student learns that a library is a place to test or expand upon ideas presented to them, in or out of the classroom. The most effective antidote to the poison of mindless orthodoxy is ready access to a broad sweep of ideas and philosophies. There is no danger in such exposure. The danger is in mind control. It is also worth mentioning here that this does play into reading habits as people grow into adulthood. If you don't have access to materials that you might like when you're younger, you are less likely to experiment with these materials as you get older in life. And then, as these materials become less commercially active for publishers to sell, these books then go out of print, and publishers become less likely to pick up authors that are writing about these subjects. This does link into something I'm going to talk about later on about the algorithm, so we'll get back to it then. But in many ways, this is the most obvious threat to reading and publishing going forward, as we see vast swathes of authors just cut out of schools. And this isn't a purely US issue. There is pressure here in the UK in certain libraries to remove books from libraries. So far it has been resisted by and large, and censorship does exist in many other countries as well. But right now the US is a really interesting microcosm to take a look at to do with this. Technology is always the harbinger of change, and that has never been more obvious than the effects we're beginning to see with AI. But first we need to define what AI actually is. The Oxford definition of AI is the study and development of computer systems that can copy intelligent human behaviour. But let's go a step further than that. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is a set of technologies that enable computers to perform a variety of advanced functions, including the ability to see, understand, and translate spoken and written language, analyse data, and make recommendations. But that in itself still feels a little bit too vague. The definition of AI here in the UK describes a computer system which can perform tasks usually requiring human intelligence. This could include visual perception, speech recognition, or translation between languages. The key point I want to drill down on here is the point of performing a task that usually requires human intelligence. So why is this a big deal? Well, if you take this to its logical conclusion, you have a system where AI writes books. And even if you take it to its lesser extreme, you actually have a system where AI is used to edit books for authors, as they will be able to go through the book and find errors or mistakes at a quicker rate than a human editor could do. The issues here are actually largely ethical concerns. First of all is the loss of job opportunities for both authors and editors, as well as cover designers, so on and so forth. But there's another ethical concern that doesn't get spoken about nearly enough, and that is the ethical concern around how do you teach this AI what's good? And the answer is you provide it with material. The problem here is a lot of that material is copyright protected, And using that material to teach AI is actually an infringement of copyright law in most countries. And there are examples of certain big AI companies admitting to allowing their AI bots to scrape copyrighted material for the process of learning. Now, the obvious comeback to this is that if you're a creative, you're going to be inspired by things around you. They could be written works, TV, film, all of which are going to be copyright protected. There is a difference here, however, because due to our naturally human limitations and our own unique interests, we pull inspiration from specific points, not the entire works as a rule of thumb. Whereas an AI will take multiple works, remember them all perfectly because of the nature of the machine, and then will do one of two things. Number one, it will analyse that data within a set of parameters set by the owning company. Or number two, it will pull all the data subsets together and pick up the most popular or most often used tropes. Once all this data has been correlated, it will create a piece of work set on a number of parameters, set up by presumably the publisher. The problem here is if it's aping a specific author's voice in terms of writing style. Because if that author has not given permission for their work to be used for the AI and the AI uses it anyway, whilst there is a bit of a grey area with copyright infringement there, it's certainly not morally a great thing to do. And we have already started to see this happen with AI being used specifically more often in TV and film, being used to recreate the likenesses of actors that have sadly passed away, and arguably in special effects involving de-aging as well. And whilst it is worth noting that permission is given in most of these instances by the family of the deceased, there is a question mark there of where the line is to be drawn. And I fetched this up because of an article I read recently. The reason I wanted to mention that specifically is that it links into the image rights and the issues we're potentially seeing around films and TV as well. And this isn't to say that people cannot sign their rights away. They absolutely can if they choose to. But as of right now, this is such a legislative grey area because international and national laws have not caught up with the tech yet, and probably never will because tech always outpaces legislation. So you're going to end up with this situation where people potentially are going to sign something over and then get caught out and lose out on earnings because there's no legislation to back up either side here until it hits the courts. And in that case, realistically, it doesn't go well for the smaller person in that situation. AI is a tool like anything. It's not an evil thing in of itself. However, there is a real concern here that AI could be on the steps to potentially replacing authors and making far cheaper product for the publishers to sell at a higher markup, therefore causing a loss of jobs. But also, there's another challenge here, and this leads into my next point about algorithmic content. What do I mean by algorithmic content? And I kind of mean more than anything else, homogenized content. So the idea of an algorithm is to put the best match of thing A to person B. That straightforward. It is either to sell the best thing to this person, find the best content for them, and the reverse is also true for big business. The idea of algorithms is so that they can market most effectively to whatever their base is and maximize their profits. Now, the problem comes in the way algorithms work because they pull whole subsets of data and that data can be manipulated. And this is why I started off with book bans and AI, because AI, first of all, is going to be used predominantly to actually go through the data and pick out the key trends. If you have an issue with book banning, as those young people move into the space where they can buy books, their choice of books is going to potentially be narrower because of what they read when they were at school and what they were able to access. Therefore, certain points on that axis are going to fall off because people are no longer buying those books, so they no longer begin to appear in the algorithm. The AI then doesn't find these books potentially. Therefore, as that starts to be used to create more and more content, you have a further narrowing of the bands. And then as the AI and people study the algorithms, you have an even more narrowing of the bands because what's most popular is this. And all this isn't there because it's not popular with the algorithm. And the algorithm in itself is nothing more than a tool, just like a sword is nothing more than a tool. However, there is a danger here of truly creative voices being lost because of the narrowing of an algorithm to maximize profits for a business. And this isn't as a criticism of business per se. Businesses are there to do a job, and their job is to make boat tons of money. So they're going to use their tools to do this. And quite often what you are currently seeing is this trend already. A lot of big publishers have quite a narrow spread in terms of the types of authors they put into each of its genres and type of stories they are willing to release. Now, some of them do have branch off houses for the more risque sort of titles, but the biggest points of the publishing house that get the most funding and the most money do tend to play it safe because business is risk averse, which makes sense. And there was a really interesting interview done by Sam Harrison, which I will link down below, an amazing YouTuber, with Ryan, who is one of the people behind Your Paper Quest. And it touched on a number of things that I've spoken about in this video. I highly recommend you give it a check out. And in there specifically, a point that got me quite interested was talking about the approach that publishers take to creative works. So they're the main things, but there is one more thing that I want to mention. The last one I want to talk about is something that I think falls under the radar far more often than it should. I want to talk about book subscriptions here. And I don't mean book subscriptions like your book boxes. Whilst I have some issues with subscription boxes due to the blind bag nature of them, that's not what I want to talk about here. I'm not talking about things like Rainbow Crate, Fairy Loot, Illuma Crate, the Abominable Book Club, so on and so forth. What I'm talking about is the Netflix of books. So if I'm not talking about book subscriptions like book boxes, what do I mean? I am talking about full library access subscriptions. The two biggest examples being Kindle Unlimited and Kobo Plus as of right now. And as it stands, I don't see either of those as a major problem beyond some ethical concerns with the businesses and the way they pay authors. However, we have seen this before in streaming services. It began with Netflix. Netflix had a much bigger range than it has today. But over time, competitors flourished in its shadow. And then the big studios realised that there's a lot of money to be made from subscription services and began to pull their content from Netflix and start their own subscription services. So whereas we began with Netflix, we now have things like Hulu, HBO Max, Prime Video, Apple TV, Peacock, Crunchyroll, Paramount Plus, Disney Plus, and many, many more, segregating the pie of content, each with their own unique subscription fee. And the problem with multiple subscriptions for similar services with different content is people only have so many pennies in their wallet. And we have seen a number of these subscription services fail because of the competition and the fact that what they were offering was not necessarily worth the price to a number of consumers. And it's also seen price rises from some of the big guns as well, Netflix being particularly guilty of this over the years, as well as cracking down on things like password sharing. We've also seen this in video games with various different subscription services linked to publishers there as well. The problem with this is it gatekeeps content behind multiple paywalls, as people only have so much money. It also puts publishers in a much stronger position when it comes to their negotiating power with authors and creators, allowing them to get a better deal than the actual creators do. In addition to that, it potentially has a knock-on effect affecting the algorithm which these companies use to actually analyze data, because it has restricted content to large swathes of the market, therefore meaning certain types of books do not get read. It also potentially removes a little bit of job security for creators as well. We've seen this multiple times with streaming services where a show has done seemingly very well and then just been unceremoniously dumped for not meeting expectations, often because the expectations were ridiculous. It also opens up the possibility of putting publishers in a position where they can demand that an author's content is used to train AI. thus causing the vicious cycle already mentioned. We've already beginning to see this in the US, with HarperCollins asking some of its non-fiction authors for permission to license their books to Microsoft to help train its large language model AI. I feel the need to say here that I'm actually not against the idea of book subscription services for full library use. The issue comes where you go to one of two extremes. You either have one company which is so market dominant that no one else can compete, and therefore it effectively sets the rates for everything. That's bad for consumers, that's bad for creators. And on the other side, you don't want an overly fragmented market where everything is paywall behind specific publishers' subscription service. What you ideally need is a number of independent services, multiple Netflix as you will, who are willing to go out and sub-license and compete with each other for customers based on price point. And that, in fact, gives creators a stronger voice as well for where their content goes. It does incentivize better product as well. But that's my thought on book subscriptions. So where does that potentially leave us? But I think we're going to be okay. So the reason I think this, starting from point one, the book bannings, the sheer visceral reaction to the level of book bannings is insane and should be applauded. Whenever books get banned, you have the big organisations like the ALA or PEN America talking about it and highlighting it. You have content creators highlighting it. You have things like the banned books reading challenges. You then have publishers and authors obviously pushing back against this because they don't want their stuff being banned. You have celebrities, governments, parents, local communities, actual library workers all pushing loudly against these challenges and these bans. And eventually, that will keep the spotlight on these bans, and over time, common sense will almost certainly prevail in time. So that's number one. In terms of AI, I think AI is here to stay. I think we're going to see AI books more frequently. I think AI is going to be used more in editing as a tool. I don't particularly like saying any of those statements. I think it is here to stay. And I do think in some ways it does have a place. However, it shouldn't be replacing creatives, certainly not. It should also only be used sparingly in the editing process, because no matter how well an AI is trained, it isn't going to catch the authentic and potentially regional voice of the author. So that's something to bear in mind there, but I do think AI is here to stay. And the same can be said for algorithmic content as well. Algorithms are just going to get more and more advanced. And I think we are going to see a narrowing of the mainstream selection over time because of that. But the counterpoint to that is you do now have a flourishing indie space, which is well worth mentioning here. My favourite books this year, by and large, have been from small press or indie self-published authors. And I think a challenge, I suppose, I would throw to everyone out is to go out and see what self-published books you can find. You can find them all over social media. You can find them on Goodreads. There's amazing books out there. There's some amazing YouTubers that talk about indie titles as well. Go and check them out. Go and find your next favourite book, because I guarantee you, once you find the indie space, you won't want to leave it, because there's phenomenal writers out there that just are not getting the break into the big publishers because they don't quite fit what the publishers are looking for. Finally, onto subscription boxes, and subscription services. I don't think we're going to hit market splintering, particularly segregation. And part of that, and I hate to say this, is because of Amazon. Because I have a sneaky feeling that if the big five publishers try to pull their ebooks from Amazon to paywall it behind their own subscription services, I don't think Amazon will be selling their physical books anymore either. And I think if that happens, they lose too much money. Now, that's not to say I don't have concerns with Amazon having such a powerful hold. And I do hope we do see more, especially ebook services, being spread out amongst other services beyond Kobo and Amazon, and them growing so that you have a truly diverse and competitive market. And also worth mentioning at this point is library services. And this again does kind of link back into the banned books talk, but libraries are still around. They are still a thing. And you have the amazing apps like Libby and BorrowBox that allow you to easily download and borrow ebooks from your local libraries for free. And that is an amazing resource that I don't think enough people use. I certainly didn't. I didn't know BorrowBox existed until quite recently because the Libby selection from my library was rubbish. BorrowBox is quite good, and it depends on which service your library uses, which one will be better for you, and it's well worth checking out. And the other thing as well is, bizarre though it sounds, the book industry and the publishing industry hasn't really changed in a couple of 100 years. Not really. It's still dominated by 5 major publishers. It has been for a long time at this point. And of all the big media creative platforms, I suppose you'd call it, media types, it is both the oldest and the least resistant to change. It still has a strong physical presence, and a lot of people still physically prefer having books in their hand. I know I do. I prefer to physically hold and read a book than have an ebook. So that is worth bearing in mind as well. It's incredibly resistant to the pressures of change. And I think, with all that being said, we'll probably be okay. But that's it from me for today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's a bit of a long one. It's a bit of a different thing. If you've got any thoughts, I would love to know. Let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to see more videos like this on the channel, please give it a thumbs up and a comment and let me know as well, because it really helps me out. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you all very soon.